Welcome to Oysters with a Pearl, the podcast series presenting the key outcomes of the eMSP NBSR project. My name's Kira G. I'm an MSP expert working at the Federal Maritime and Hydrographic Agency in Germany, and I'm delighted to be a host for this series. The EU-funded eMSP NBSR project brought together MSP planners, experts and stakeholders from the North Sea and Baltic Sea regions to collaboratively advance MSP practice. Urgent emerging topics were considered in communities of practice, and a series of practical recommendations were developed. Today we are talking about communities of practice, or the COP-based approach, an innovative, collaborative approach that was central to the eMSP project. I'm joined by Andrea Morf from Nordregio in Sweden, and José, Andringa and Jan-Peter Oelen from the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, who mentored the communities of practice within the eMSP project. Very nice to have you.
Hello, good to be here.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Jan-Peter, I'd like to start with you. You've worked with communities of practice for quite a while. What is a community of practice? How is it different from, shall we say, a project group or maybe an interest group?
Well, the basic questions are always the hardest. It's quite simply a group of people who are coming together, and in this case, they share experiences, analysis, and give views from their professional expertise. They also can develop new standards, new ideas, practices. Basically, and that's quite important, I think, anything that's deemed essential and feasible to do by this group themselves. And therein also lies a big difference with, for instance, a project group. Because where a project group usually has a formal project lead with a certain mandate, in a community practice, equality between the members is a real fundamental and central principle. Community practice mostly is led by the needs and the questions put forward by the participants, not by a project plan or by a management board. So this makes it quite interesting. It's much more of a free-form process where co-creation, so doing things together, is really at its foundation.
I like the idea that it's actually a very flexible approach. This is what I'm hearing you say.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really a hierarchical approach. It's not a predetermined approach. It's really something that comes about because there's a need. And then the people who are part of that community are very much in the driving seat. It's really up to them to take things forward and to develop whatever practices or topic they think is necessary.
No, it's exactly that, and that was also one of the things that in the beginning certainly was quite challenging, because in this European program framework, well, how do you go about saying, well, we don't know exactly where we're going to end up. We have to ask the people first.
I can imagine that was quite a learning curve.
It was.
But then, José, let me come to you. This sounds like a really innovative approach, actually, something that many people might find quite unusual initially, who haven't experienced it before. So when would you say is a communities of practice approach particularly useful? And why do you think MSP in particular might benefit from it?
Well, maybe I can start with some example when you're not going to choose, when it's not handy to choose a community of practice approach. That is when it's very clear what should happen and very clear who could do this best, then please just take a project approach. But if there is a complex issue and you need a lot of knowledge, a lot of different types of knowledge, you need co-creation, then I would advise a community of practice when the possibility is there. And I think MSP is complex, so we need these different types of knowledge and all these whole people. So it's not only the type of knowledge they bring in, but they bring also themselves and their other kinds of experience.
Yes, MSP is definitely complicated, that much we know. So let's come to the eMSP project more specifically then. And I'd like to ask you, Andrea, to tell us a little bit more about how the project applied the communities of practice approach. Now, each thematic learning strand had its own community of practice. And then the project itself was also actually a community of practice as a whole. Are there any key lessons that you might be able to share? Maybe some of the do's and don'ts that you've learned?
Thank you, Kira, for that big question. If I have to, so to say, check the boxes in relation to what is really important, then I have to add to what José already has said in terms of a topic that has to be urgent and there has to be an interest in that topic, or maybe also some kind of social interest of a good team that is already working together. And then I have to emphasize two things. On one hand, it's the support function, because without that support function, both in the project where we had method training, coaching and mentoring, we had scientific input, we had cross-reflection. This support function has to be both leading and listening, taking care of the process. It is also extremely important to plan for sufficient time and to believe in the open approach and embrace the confusion and complexity and help organizing with respect, openness, equality, listening, and what stays within the group or is shared has to be agreed by the group, and that there are also some kinds of rules of conflict management if there happens to be some kind of disagreement. You asked about the don'ts, and I have tried a few one-liners. Don't rush, take the time that the cup needs. Don't change a winning team, but have backups. And try not to be narrow and rigid unless you need to come towards the target in the final phase.
Yes, it is. Do listen to each other. Do ask each other. And if you do that consistently, then I probably all the don'ts will disappear. And I just want to emphasize it. It's all about creating this safe learning environment together. It's quite challenging and but also essential to the success. Yes.
I'm fascinated, Andrea, to hear you say embrace the confusion. That's probably very true for many of the participants in such an approach, because I'm hearing also that it is a flexible approach, it's open, it can be taken in many directions, but it needs certain ground rules for interaction. It's a learning platform, I'm hearing you say, it's a learning experience, it's a journey that people will participate in. And it needs a supporting function. That's also really interesting. It doesn't just happen on its own. It needs to have something to act as a guide or drive it forward on occasion, something to help in case it runs into problems.
Yeah, it's about balancing the leadership in terms of pointing at something and having some kind of a plan and listening to what is happening in the community. So what we have been working with is an innovation process in marine spatial planning. So some kind of institutional and social innovation, probably.
I can imagine that most people would be a lot more used to project work and the more guided and structured approach that comes with project work. So, Jan-Peter, I know that you did a lot of the initial mentoring together with José. So let me ask you, what did you find the most challenging parts in the communities of practice journey for the participants? What was it that people really struggled with?
I don't want to scare off any potential listeners, thinking that this community of practice is kind of a mythical approach that is you should be in awe of. It's really not. We all are people. We all are a part of communities, and we all have a great extensive experience in dealing with people out of our own free will. So that basically is also what we are trying to do. The issue that was brought up, I think, the most was quite ordinary. That's why, oh, I don't have time. I don't have money to do this. I don't have the resources. That's quite the same as any other project. But more on a philosophical, as you will, side, the community of practice draws heavily on the ability of its members to be curious, daring to admit that you don't know the answer. So to adopt this community of practice mindset as a member, but also within the support function, the people who support the community practice, that's quite difficult, and it seems so easy. I was very apprehensive making this way of working within a European context, but actually what we found also at sometimes this strict focus on certain results can be helpful. Sometimes when there's so much content to be addressed, you kind of, it's very hard to keep your focus. And then to have these external focus points, which you agreed upon in the project proposal, they can act as focus points for the discussions that you have among each other. So they can also be helpful.
So certain results maybe that have been promised, or certain timelines that have to be followed, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly that. It can be quite chaotic sometimes, very difficult to what course do we really want to address and investigate. Yeah, and then it can be helpful to have some focus points. Yeah.
But it sounds to me like the eMSP project was a really good field for experimenting almost a little bit with the communities of practice and with the different approaches that can be taken. And, you know, each learning strand having its own community provided a really good field for exactly that freedom to try out different approaches and to go with the topics, to go with the people that came together under each learning strand in a way. So given that diversity of communities that emerged, I wanted to come back to you, José, and ask you, what did you find most inspiring overall about the eMSP communities that developed?
I think I got very enthusiastic myself about the openness of the people, the partners in the project. They were really open for this open process. And the inspiring part for me as a trainer, with a view of a trainer, is always also what do they bring in themselves already from their own experience. And they had different backgrounds, and they have, of course, also just as sometimes as a member, been in processes where they did learn from, so they could bring in those things, and we could just have a look what have they already from themselves and what should they learn. And then we learned together new things from each other, just finding out for ourselves also by more experienced in communities practice, but then also to make more explicit how we did it. That was very inspiring. And of course then also that results were there, that they did very nice things in their own community of practice. So that was great.
So from that initial confusion, now it's got to a point where people, I imagine, know a lot more about the ins and outs of the COP-based approach. So Andrea, let me come back to you and ask you, how will the COPs be taken forward in the future, do you think?
What I have observed, there has already been a community in the Baltic Sea area with some links to the North Sea, and now there are more people who know each other, who have been working with each other, who trust each other. So there is like this social capital. I think there is also the capacity to use the approach and the understanding of its strengths and weaknesses and of its prerequisites. There is a willingness to share, and also the discovery that we can have fun together working with MSP issues, and there can be new learnings and new innovation. And I think also that planners from different countries, they have realized, okay, they have a hierarchical planning system and they have to follow like this system, but maybe they can use communities of practice as some kind of a complement when they want to explore things, when they want to work with information sharing and not decision making. And so they see the strengths of this approach, I think.
That sounds really excellent. I think that is so important that, you know, we look beyond the actual project results that we are so familiar with, you know, the reports and the recommendations, but actually see all these intangibles, the things that are just as important, but don't necessarily get written up in any way. So it's really good to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes it's the most overlooked asset of any community of practice. It's less about the tangible outcomes, the policy briefs or the project results, but it is more about the relationships that you have built between people. And there, I think, in every sector where issues are transboundary, you have to reach out to other people, and not only the formal decision-making relationships like Andrea just said, but really also tie together the people who are actually working on that. And this is really the core of why you should work with the community of practice, to build these relationships.
Brilliant. That is excellent. That's so important for MSP, especially at the stage we're at now, where things are changing fast, where there's new topics coming in, where there's new stakeholders, new sectors, waiting to be brought in. So very, very timely, I think. So great. We're all regretting to some extent that the project is coming to an end, but I do hope very much that the communities will continue in one way or another. Let's certainly keep those intangibles alive, and I very much hope that that'll be to the benefit of MSP. Thank you very much again to the three of you.
Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us today. If you'd like to find out more, go to the eMSP website on www.emsproject.eu to download the policy briefs and reports, including the ones on the communities of practice. And don't forget to tune in for the other episodes of Oysters with a Pearl, which are also available on the website.